Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to the Netherlands once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip down there. So this is another brewery that has never featured on the channel before, but knowing the standard of Dutch craft beer as I do these days, I'm pretty confident that it will be another good one. They've got somewhere in the region of 750, 800 craft breweries in the Netherlands, which is pretty impressive for a country of 18 million people, and I've had some really good experiences with the Dutch beer scene so far. But yeah, for this brewery we are going to go to Almere, which is quite close to Amsterdam, and we're having a look at my first beer from Brouwerij Stijl. So this particular beer is simply called Russian Imperial Stout. It comes in at 10% ABV, and it apparently has a little bit of sea salt and vanilla added into it, so that should be quite interesting. I don't remember having had an Imperial Stout with sea salt in it before, so quite curious to see how that turns out. But as I said, the Dutch beers tend to be very, very good, so I'm quite confident this one will be another nice brew. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Lovely artwork on it as well, I have to say. But yeah, as always with my Dutch reviews, a massive shout out to my very good friends in the Dutch Beer Collective. There's Thomas Hoendam of Thomas Open, who's a very, very good friend of mine. There is Remy Den Dupe, who is Beer Geek Holland. He is the OG beer tuber down there, of course. There's Herben Caspers, who is Dutch Beer Geek, and then there's also now Douglas Hesselmans as well, who is Beers with Douglas. All four of them are lovely guys, and I do hope that I can get back down to the Netherlands again and meet the latter three, because I've only met Thomas in person. But yeah, fingers crossed we can do that once this whole COVID-19 pandemic buggers off. But yeah, this beer was a gift from them. They couldn't remember which one of them exactly gave me this, so we'll just give a big shout out to all four of them. But make sure you check out the link to their Facebook and Instagram page down there in the video description below, and there you can find the links to all four of their individual channels. Lovely guys, all of them very knowledgeable about beer, very passionate as well. Quite a few of them are doing English reviews, but if you are a Dutch speaker, do make sure you go and check all four of those guys out and show them some love. And even if you're not a Dutch speaker, go and check out their channels anyway and have a chat with them. They love chatting about beer. But yeah, definitely cool to have another Dutch beer for you here on the channel. I'm curious to see how this one turns out, and I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Brouwerij Stijl. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Dutch beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment, because I've still got a little bit of a stockpile of Dutch things to work my way through. But I hope you enjoy seeing that, and as always, don't hesitate to get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brouwerij Stijl then, on to my brewery notes. So Brouwerij Stijl, as I mentioned to you earlier, is based in Almere, which is just to the east and over the Markermeer, the big lake, from Amsterdam, and the brewery is run by the Herads family, and it was founded back in 2015. And I do apologise for any bad Dutch pronunciations in this video. Dutch is quite a difficult language to get the pronunciation right. But anyway, Raymond is a brewer and beer judge, while his wife Anneke runs the business side of the brewery, but apparently she's very creative and also a capable brewer as well. But these guys first became interested in beer having tried a lot of the different Belgian things, and then trips over to America inspired them to explore brewing the more kind of experimental American style craft beers, and they just kind of went from there. But they've got a very small brewery in Almere where they do little experimental brews. They call this the Steel Beer Lab, but they brew their kind of bigger batches and commercial beers at Rock City Brewing in nearby Amersfoort, and they do all of the brewing themselves there apparently. So they are kind of a gypsy brewery, but they do have their own little development brewery, if you like, which is kind of cool. So quite an interesting model that I don't think I've heard of another brewery that does it quite in that way. But as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 40 different kinds of beer, and they do seem to be well respected. So yeah, I'm sure the Dutch guys wouldn't have given me this beer if it wasn't a good one, of course. So yeah, hopefully I can try a few more styles from them at some point in the future, but definitely cool to highlight another little Dutch brewery here on the channel. So yeah, I do need to review some beers from Rock City as well, because I think I tried the one that was brewed as a tribute to Remy from Beer Geek Holland. I reviewed that with my good friend Thomas, and we had great fun reviewing that. It was a lovely, lovely beer. So I do need to get a hold of some Rock City beers at some point to review, and as I say, hopefully we can get a few more things from Brouwerij Stijl as well. The only other thing to really point out about this is that Stijl literally translates into English as style, so basically the name of this brewery is Style Brewery. So yeah, as of March 2021, as I say, they've produced around 40 different beers, and there seems to be a good variety of different styles down there. But yeah, if you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself then. So the artwork on this one, I have to say, it looks a little bit of a cross between like Viking and almost Maori in some ways. It really looks a little bit of a kind of mixture, if you like. The artwork on this, the sort of colour schemes and some of the patterns and stuff, the pattern is a little bit more Viking, but the sort of colours and things and the kind of dots and stuff like that does remind me a little bit of some of the Maori artwork that I saw when I was down in New Zealand. But yeah, as I said to you earlier, this one is a 10% Imperial Stout, sea salt and vanilla added into the brew. Plain bottle cap, pardon me, plain bottle cap there, 330ml bottle. I'm not sure what this beer would actually cost, but yeah, looks as if it's going to be a very nice one. So yeah, without further ado, let's get this guy out and into the glass then. Typical, just as I'm about to kind of get started on this, I get a wee thing in my throat. I don't know, throat's been quite dry. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. A 10% Russian Imperial Stout from Almere near Amsterdam in the Netherlands, brewed with sea salt and vanilla. So yeah, hopefully this is another good beer. Just sugar up the last little bit, yep, and there we are. So, come on, last of the little droppies in. There we are. So yeah, really love that artwork, Viking Maori sort of thing, looks awesome. But yeah, just check that it's lined up nicely so that my OCD is happy, and I think that's about right. But yeah, as you can see, and as you would expect from a Russian Imperial Stout, this one's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. If I shine it up to the light, there's not even a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola Pepsi coloured edge to this one. This one is opaque as hell basically. There's no light coming through that at all. But yeah, ebony rosewood kind of colour, black as night, however you want to describe it. But you could see that when this beer poured, it had about a half finger of a frothy, I would say medium tan head on this one. Not the darkest of tan heads that I've come across, but I would say it's got a little bit of kind of dark colour to it. But you can see the head on this one is just fading away a little bit to be a very thin foamy layer. But it does look very, very nice. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But yeah, it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. So yeah, I have to say when the head's faded away, I do get a little bit of that Coca-Cola colour edge to it. So I'm sorry I told you lies earlier, but the colour of this one is absolutely what you would expect to the style. Remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on a couple of things. One, the length of your wort boil, and then two, the exact type of malts that you use. Both of those are kind of interdependent, but essentially the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But you know, if you use black malt in a beer, you are going to get a very dark beer compared to if you use Pilsner malt or something like this. So yeah, dependent mainly on the type of malts that you use and the wort boil. Barrel aging and adjuncts, of course, will play a role in the beer, but not so much in this case, because vanilla and sea salt are not really going to don't really have much colour to them, in fairness. But yeah, certainly looks like a nice RIS, this one. So let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on. Nothing surprising about the appearance, really. Oh, you can smell the saltiness in that. That is quite interesting, I have to say. Yeah. yeah, you can really smell the saltiness of that straight away. But yeah, it's interesting that, as I say, I don't remember ever having had an RIS, a Russian Imperial Stout, with sea salt in it, but you really can smell a little bit of that in it. I've had oyster stouts and things like that before, which do tend to be kind of salty. Not the greatest fan of oyster stouts, in fairness, but yeah, that's probably the closest thing I've had to that's probably the closest beer I can think of that has an aroma akin to this one. But yeah, it smells really nice, this beer. The more that you smell of it, the more you get the really dark elements out of this one. So yeah, very interesting beer. And it's got a real level of complexity to it, this one. So let's try and just break this one down then. So with the backbone of this beer, you can smell like a really toasty, well-fired, bread crusty sort of thing out of this one. I suspect there might be a little bit of Carafa in this. It does smell a little bit reminiscent of some of these Weyermann Carafa malts, just because of the fact that it's got that like really well-fired bread crusty element to it. You do get an element of a kind of smooth bready quality there, like a very kind of thick, smooth, bready bread crust, and I do like that about the beer too. But you can smell a few sort of harsher malts in there as well. You know, there's maybe a bit of special B or a straight up black malt or something like this. So you do get a mix of that slightly more bread crusty. You do get an element of that more kind of bread crusty element out of it as well from the from what I suspect is Carafa. There's quite a few different varieties of Carafa, incidentally, but it has got a nice kind of roasty, toasty backbone, which is what you would expect from a Russian Imperial Stout. But yeah, on top of that, there's a nice kind of thick, brown bready type quality to this one, which I think goes together really nicely. I don't know if it's got a little bit of an almost rye bready sweetness to it. It almost has a little bit of that, you know, just a little bit of that kind of German rye bready sort of sweetness to it for sure. But yeah, the aroma of the beer is really pretty nice actually. But the salt, it's interesting, you know, I'm trying to kind of go through and get all the little components of the aroma in this one, but the salt is really quite prominent in this. I can just feel that sort of saltiness in the nose there, which is quite interesting. But the beer does have one or two little woody undertones to it, as well as a few little nutty things. But on top of that, you can definitely get a bit of a kind of high cocoa chocolate, you know, a sort of 80-90% cocoa kind of thing going on with this. You can smell that sitting on top, and in the centre of the nose I think there's a good little bit of brown sugar in there, like a really highly caramelised treacle molasses sort of thing. It's almost like a little bit of a kind of salty treacle note that you get out of this beer on top. For me, there's definitely a little bit of brown sugar to this one, and the more that I smell of that and the more that I kind of concentrate on that particular aroma, it actually shows a little bit of toasted character too. But I have to say, when it comes to the vanilla, I get a little bit of it, and it comes across as quite an oily vanilla rather than being sweet. But I don't find the vanilla overly prominent in this one. But yeah, the malty side of this beer comes across like it's had a very long boil, this beer, because you can just smell the oiliness and the caramelisation of the brown sugars in there. But I really like how all of that just kind of fits together actually. It's just a lovely, lovely smelling beer, this one. But as I say, the saltiness, I'm surprised at how prominent the saltiness is in this one, but the vanilla for me takes a bit of a back seat. I'm sure we'll pick that up in the actual flavour of the beer though. But yeah, the malty, adjuncty side of this beer, I think, is pretty damn nice. I think that's going to make for a really interesting, complex flavour for sure. But on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect. There's a good little touch of earthiness to this one. There's a nice little bit of a big floral aromatic-y kind of side of things. Obviously the longer you age this beer, the more that's going to kind of drop out, if you like. But yeah, it's got a really interesting depth to it, this beer actually. I really like how all of that kind of pieces together. So I would be curious to know if there's a little bit of Chinook or something in this. There's just a wee bit of something in this beer that's telling me it could be a bit of Chinook that's been used in this one. That can be a really interesting hop to use in Imperial Stouts, because the thing that I think is making me think that it has, you can smell just a little bit of the depth to the green component in this beer. There's a wee bit of earthiness at the back of the nose, but then you get those slightly piney notes, but you also get a floral aromaticity out of it. And as I say, the longer you age this beer, and you could probably age this beer for a couple of years, The longer you age this one, the more those will drop out and the beer will mellow out in a sense. But the strength of that green component does make me wonder if it's Chinook. But yeah, it's got a good little touch of grassy zestiness to it as well. But obviously in a darker beer, the focus is on the malty side of things. But for me, I do get a little bit of hoppy character out of this one, but it depends on how old your bottle's going to be, of course. But the fruity side of the things, that's another thing that makes me wonder about Chinook in this one. So straight away with this beer, you can smell a mixture of that slightly sharp raisiny note to it. It's got a bit of a juicy plum underneath, but for me there's a little bit of black currant and quite a prominent blackberry note on this one. So yeah, there's a mix of the sharpness that you get on the fruity side of this beer is a mix of kind of raisiny and blackberry type notes, but underneath you get the kind of plummy notes, like I'm saying, and a bit of a kind of black curranty element. And it's that slight sharpness and the kind of juicy plum that makes me wonder about Chinook. Of course, when it comes to stouts like this, there's various different hops you can use that would be suitable. You know, Kent Goldings and Bramling's Cross from England are quite popular. Summit from America, I think Williamette can be used in stouts like this as well and give you some lovely fruity notes. Eureka would be another one. I don't know how prominent Eureka is in terms of like big floral aromaticity, but yeah, there is just something in my head that's saying that this could well be a bit of Chinook that's in this. But Eureka, I'm pretty sure Eureka's quite high in alpha acid actually, so that would make sense for this beer as well. I'd be curious to know what hop they've used in this. It's difficult to keep up with all the different hops that are out there these days. I always liked playing Guess the Hops when it came to beers, but you know, it's just I'm going to get more of them wrong these days than I would have previously, just because of the sheer number of hops out there. But the fruity side of the beer, as I say, a little bit sharp, black curranty, sort of raisiny notes, bit of plum underneath, and then a bit of a black curranty sort of thing as well, giving you that. But yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this beer. It's got a good bit of depth to it, this one, and I think it's a little bit unique with the saltiness. So yeah, it's always half the experience when it comes to craft beer. So yeah, let's have a look at this one then. So this one is the Russian Imperial Stout, coming in at 10% ABV. Brewed by Brouwerij Stijl, based in Almere, near Amsterdam in the Netherlands. It's also saying on the side here, it's a combination of an anthropologist and a beer brewer. So yeah, I'm guessing that what was the woman's name again? I'm guessing that where is it? Aneka. That's it. I'm just saw it on the notes on my brewery notes there. It's Aneka. I'm guessing that she must be an anthropologist then, or anthropologist. Brain is not working in the videos these days, guys. But let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers, prost. That's pretty damn nice, I have to say. Impressed with that. First impression is that this is a really just very slick beer. Proper old school Russian Imperial Stout, this one. And you know, this is a nice change of pace. I've said this in other reviews recently. The stouts these days always seem to be, you know, big and sweet. It's this big pastry stout craze that's kind of going around the place. And I mean, I like one of those every so often. I do like some of these big sweet stouts. But to go back to something like this is really nice as well. I do miss the kind of more classic take on the Imperial Stouts. And it, you know, in fairness, it does, having these big sweet stouts, the big massive thick things, it does make you appreciate something like this that's a little bit more old school. But I'm going to say straight away, thumbs up to Brouwerij Stijl for this one. I think it's turned out really nicely. So yeah, if you get the chance to have a go at this beer, definitely do. You're going to get a really nice old school Russian Imperial Stout out of it. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this one then and describe it for you properly. But yeah, where to begin with this one? And the salt there. First impression as well, I'm getting the saltiness on the top of the tongue, which is quite interesting too. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely not quite as thick as I thought it was going to be. It really is a very slick Imperial Stout, this one, but I like it. Straight away then, in the middle third of your palate, you can feel that nice, smooth, roasty backbone to the beer. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit, it does taste a little bit more like Special B in the flavour of this one, because it reminds me a little bit of the Nerd Brewing stouts from Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. The bit of the roasty backbone that the beer has reminds me of that. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Special B that's in this one. It could be a little bit of Carafa. It certainly smelled a little bit more like Carafa, but from the flavour I'm wondering if Special B is in the base there. But yeah, it's got a really like toasty, well-fired, bread crusty sort of thing there. That's the base bone of the beer. On top of that, you do get a little bit of a kind of brown bready sort of thing. It's nowhere near as sweet as I was picking up elements of kind of rye bread in the aroma there, but this beer does come across really quite differently to the aroma. Sometimes you get beers that match very well to the aroma, sometimes they kind of deviate a little bit, and this one definitely is a bit different from its aroma. But yeah, there is a layer of a kind of smooth brown bready character to this one, which I really quite like. And that's, you know, that's the backbone of your beer. You will notice if you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, there are one or two little woody elements to the beer, and in the centre of the palate, as you move further forward, you do get a little element of nuttiness to this one too. So yeah. So yeah, the nutty side of this beer is quite subtle as well, but you will feel this beer really gives you a bit more dryness the further you go into the aftertaste, and you get more of these grainy elements pushing their way out of the beer. But that's the backbone of your beer. We've covered that quite well, I think, and it really does evolve to be more kind of dry the further you go into the aftertaste as well, and then the saltiness comes out on top of that too. But on top of that base layer, you've almost got like a circle in the middle of your palate there. The base layer of that circle is like a really dark chocolate. I would say, you know, like a 90% cocoa chocolate there, somewhere in that kind of region. It's a really high cocoa dark chocolate there. It's really nice, actually. That just adds a bit of depth to the beer. There is an element of a kind of brown sugary element top of this beer as well. It comes across like like a kind of treacle molassesy sort of thing, but I would say that it's the chocolate is the more prominent thing. That really high cocoa chocolate that sits in that circle is the more prominent thing, but you can feel, for me, there's just a little bit of brown sugar in there, and I think that is most likely to come from the alcohol in the beer rather than a more brown sugary leaning malt. Actually, it doesn't taste so much as if this beer has some sort of caramel malt in it, this one, but I think that is fairly uncommon, come to think of it, for a Russian Imperial Stout. For me, the Russian Imperial Stouts are always a little bit more kind of roasty and toasty, and that's exactly what this beer gives you. So yeah, high cocoa chocolate on the base layer there, a teeny bit of a kind of toasty, well-fired brown sugary note sitting on top of that, and I think that's coming. You maybe get a little bit more of a kind of sweetness in the very centre of your palate writing off, but I think quite a bit of that brown sugary note is coming from the alcohol of the beer. Alcohol always comes out as a sort of kind of caramelly flavour in my experience. But yeah, it's interesting. That circle, it actually is maybe more like an oval that kind of goes right across the middle third of your palate, but as you move kind of further forward into the front half of that kind of middle third of your tongue, you can feel it's got a little bit more of a vanilla sort of element to it as well. You can feel some of the vanilla coming out of this beer, but the vanilla is really quite subtle in this beer, in my opinion. The salt is a lot more prominent, but you'll feel the saltiness kind of coming out of the beer. It's almost like the circle is almost like this, and then either side of it you've got some of these roasty elements. You get a bit of the woodiness in there as well, and then the salt kind of sits just around the kind of border of the circle almost. The saltiness for me just comes out around the kind of border of that chocolatey circle that I've just described to you. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of combination of things that comes out of this beer. So yeah, the malty side of this one is quite nice. It is a proper old school stout, this one, and I really like it from that perspective, but the saltiness kind of mixes in with the chocolate a little bit, and that's what gives you a really unique perspective here. But in my opinion, the vanilla I find is quite subtle. So yeah, an interesting take on the Russian Imperial Stout for sure. You can definitely say that. But on the back third of your palate, then you do get a more roasty, toasty, grainy element to the beer, although it does kind of smoothen out. This whole beer smoothens out the further you go into the aftertaste. But in that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a more concentrated, thicker, bready sort of thing, and a toasty, grainy element to the beer. But yeah, I can really appreciate how that side of things goes together too. But then the back third of your palate is definitely more about that toasty, well-fired, bread crusty sort of thing. On that back third of your palate though, you can feel the sort of yeasty elements just kind of they feel a little bit more kind of airy and things like that. So you can feel that the sort of top of the beer, the top of the flavour of the beer is like this in the back third of your palate. Then as you move further forward, it just sort of condenses down. But as you reach the border region, it drops down quite sharply, and then you've got a more kind of condensed, sort of densified flavour going forward on that middle third of your palate. But yeah, I think that describes the yeasty, adjuncty, malty side of the beer fairly comprehensively. But yeah, it really smoothens out and mellows out the further you go into the aftertaste with it. So thumbs up to Brouwerij Stijl for this one. I think this works out very, very nicely, I have to say. So yeah, malty side of the beer is crucial to get right in this style, and they've done it. So well done to them. Let's look at the hoppy side of things then. So the hops are a little bit smoother than they give you the impression of being in the aroma, but they do still have those same characters that I was talking about. So in the back corner of the palate, you've got a little bit of an earthiness there, definitely. That builds a good bridge with the kind of roasty, toasty, grainy, special B kind of side of the beer. But as you move further forward, it very quickly becomes quite floral, and there is just a nice kind of floral note coming out of this beer as you progress all the way to the front corners of the palate. Again, I wonder about Chinook in this one. There is just something, it's just got the floral notes that you get out of the side of this beer, of course, are very nice. And as I said earlier, if you age this beer a little bit, those will kind of sit back and drop away. But round the front curve of the palate, for me, it does have a wee touch of kind of grassy zestiness to it there. But I think that's nice. I do think that gives you an element of contrast, and it actually suits this kind of salty side of the beer quite well too. But yeah, certainly impressed with this one. The Dutch guys have given me another really interesting beer, and as I've said to you, the standard of Dutch stuff is very high these days, so checking out some Dutch beers is definitely worth it, absolutely. But yeah, the green component of this beer is quite nice. I like the bit of floral character it has, I like the little bit of grassiness, and it just suits it quite well. But let's focus on the fruity part of the beer then. So as I always say, on that front third of your palate, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. On that border region, again between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a kind of bread crusty note, a kind of brown bready note just building up, and then you get a well-fired toasty edge to it. And the base bone, the backbone of that kind of front third of your palate is a little bit of the brown bread and also a little bit of the bread crusty element there, but sitting on top of that you've got all those nice fruity esters. So if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of the raisiny note kind of sitting on top, and you can feel a little bit of the more kind of juicy, oily, plummy character sitting underneath. But as you go further forward on the baseline of your palate, for me this one is quite black curranty. The currants I've always found are a little bit more kind of soft in their flavours, but yeah, you get quite a good black curranty base to the beer. Then as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, it's got a little bit more of an oily kind of blackberry type note to it. So yeah, I mean the blackberries give you a little touch of sharpness and juiciness, I think, the further you go into the aftertaste, and you've got a wee bit of the raisiny sharpness in the beginning, but the backbone the beer, it's a little bit more oily and plummy on the back half of that front third, and then it's got a soft kind of just kind of black curranty notes in with it as well. So the fruity side of the beer, I think, is quite nice as well. But I think just overall, it's really fair to describe this one as a kind of old school Russian Imperial Stout, and I like that. So yeah, interesting beer this one. I've certainly enjoyed the tasting section of this video. I'm going to enjoy sipping on the rest of this. But yeah, let's round off with the mouthfeel then. So as I said earlier, this is really quite a slick beer. It's by no means the thickest Imperial Stout that you're going to come across these days, but I think with all the oats and stuff and lactose and things that are being used in Imperial Stouts, it kind of gives us a false impression of what stouts should be. But yeah, I would describe this one as being top end to mid-bodied, bottom end to full-bodied, very smooth carbonation. It's got a really nice kind of wet water kind of quality to it as well. The water quality in this to me tastes very, very nice, and I'm particularly sensitive to that as a Scot, because we firmly believe in Scotland we have the best tap water in the world, although there will no doubt be other places that will claim that as well. But anyway, the water in this one, it comes across as a very clean beer this, but I've noticed that with quite a few breweries in the Netherlands actually. I don't know what they do exactly to their water profile, because of course you can manipulate the water to taste like different places and stuff like this, depending on what style you're brewing. You can do this, but yeah, it comes across really clean. Its mouthfeel and very, and you know, quite smooth, and also just a little bit slick as well. But in terms of bitterness, I think this beer is probably towards, you know, the 80-90 sort of IBU end of things, and you would expect that from a Russian Imperial Stout, and that's a mix of both from the hops and from the malty side of things. But the malty side of the beer, as I say, it is quite smooth, and at the same time it's got a good little bit of a roasty toasty character to it. There's a little touch of sweetness in this one, and I really like how that I really do like how that goes together as well. So yeah, the malty side of this beer for me is more kind of roasty and toasty, but there's a good degree of smoothness in there, and you get the saltiness coming out of it as well, and a wee bit of sweetness in the centre of your palate too. But yeah, good bit of hoppy and malty bitterness in this one, and the fruits for me, little bit of sharpness, but otherwise a kind of smooth juiciness. But this beer overall gets a nice, I think it's very well executed, so I'd be curious to try a few other different styles from these guys. So we'll need to keep an eye out for that in the future. I'll need to maybe ask the Dutch guys to see if they can get a hold of another couple of beers from this brewery for me. But yeah, really nicely executed, so well done to Brouwerij Stijl, and I think that's a good place to round off the tasting of this one. So yeah, this one was the Russian Imperial Stout brewed with vanilla and sea salt from Brouwerij Stijl in Almere, but brewed at Rock City Brewing in Amersfoort. And yeah, I think it turned out to be a really nice beer, so thank you to the Dutch Beer Collective for making this review possible. But yeah, as always, thank you for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brouwerij Stijl. Hopefully we can return to them at some point in the near future, but I really enjoyed this one, and I look forward to more beers from these guys. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Brouwerij Stijl, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. You will see a few more Dutch reviews coming up very, very soon. Slanje, Skål, cheers. Make sure you check out Brouwerij Stijl from Almere near Amsterdam down in the Netherlands. Slanje, Skål, Proost.